What do you do when your 37-year-old friend shows up to a dinner party with a 19-year-old girlfriend, throws a massive temper tantrum because she cannot legally drink, and then accuses you of being jealous? Let us get right into the absolute cringe. The writer is 33, married to his 31-year-old wife, and they hang out in a solid, tight-knit circle of about 20 people. This is a community built around tabletop games, anime, and all things geeky, and they even traveled to Comic-Con together a couple of years ago. Enter Jeremy. Jeremy is a longtime buddy in the group, and he is 37 years old. Recently, Jeremy showed up with a brand new girlfriend he met at the grand opening of a local hobby shop, claiming that one thing just magically turned into another. The glaring, incredibly uncomfortable problem is that this girl is only 19 years old. It becomes painfully obvious immediately. During one of their first hangouts, someone in the group makes a joke about Dick Cheney, and this teenager genuinely looks around and asks who that is. At another group outing, a mutual acquaintance runs into them and deadass asks Jeremy whose daughter she is. The writer feels secondhand embarrassment radiating through his bones as they have to awkwardly clarify that this is Jeremy's girlfriend. But it gets so much worse. 8 of them go out to an exclusive restaurant, but there is a strict 21 and over policy for the specific area where they are seated. Instead of owning up to his weird life choices, Jeremy throws a massive fit and demands the entire group of adults abandon their long-standing reservation just to accommodate his underage girlfriend. The group refuses, so Jeremy and his girlfriend leave, and he later whines that they completely abandoned him. The absolute breaking point comes a month or two later during a costume party. Jeremy brings her over, gets completely blasted on alcohol, and essentially uses this poor teenager as his designated driver. The writer makes sure she does not drink in his home, but the sheer optics of watching her haul her intoxicated, almost 40-year-old boyfriend to the car makes his stomach turn. At that moment, the writer decides he simply cannot bring himself to invite them to any more parties. Fast forward, Jeremy runs into the writer, rips him a new one, accuses him of running a smear campaign, and then drops the most delusional question of the century. He asks if the writer cut him out because he was jealous. The writer scoffs, straight up tells Jeremy it is because he is dating a child and it is weird. And Jeremy deflects by calling him judgmental and bragging that they are going on a trip to Europe. Now, Jeremy will not even look at him, but the writer notices that no one else in their 20-person group has actually cut Jeremy out. Hold on a second, we need to put the writer in the hot seat. Did he handle this perfectly, or is he actually part of the problem? Some people on the internet heavily criticized him for quietly tolerating this creepy dynamic for months, bad-mouthing Jeremy behind his back to closer friends instead of taking a strong moral stance on day one. By giving Jeremy so much leash, he basically watched a teenager get taken advantage of and only drew a hard line when the awkwardness inconvenienced him. But let us pivot to the absolute psychological meltdown happening inside Jeremy's head. Why does a 37-year-old man want to date someone who cannot even legally buy a drink? It is not just about finding a fellow nerd at a hobby shop. Look at his reaction. He literally accused a happily married man of being jealous of his relationship with a teenager. This reveals everything you need to know about how Jeremy views women. He sees this 19-year-old as a shiny new trophy, a status symbol. He legitimately believes that snagging a college freshman makes him the absolute envy of his adult peers. But the dark reality is that Jeremy is looking for someone with zero life experience, someone who does not know that a healthy partner does not get completely blasted at a casual costume party and force their teenage girlfriend to drive them home. He leans on her as a designated driver, which is a massive red flag that points to a serious alcohol problem and a desire for control. This taps into a massive unspoken crisis in adult friend groups, the missing stare phenomenon. You have a social circle built around shared hobbies like anime and tabletop games, spaces that are supposed to be safe, welcoming, and inclusive. But then one person starts exhibiting deeply predatory behavior, and instead of kicking them out, the group just tiptoes around the awkwardness. The writer admits that no one else in the entire group actually cut Jeremy out. Why? Because people are terrified of confrontation. But this is exactly how creeps thrive. A well adjusted, healthy 37-year-old simply does not pursue a 19-year-old. There is a staggering maturity gap. Um, it is rarely about a magical, soul deep connection. It is about a massive power imbalance. Men who date teenagers in their late 30s are doing it because women their own age will absolutely not tolerate their nonsense. They want someone malleable, someone they can mold into a submissive partner, someone who has not yet developed the boundaries required to say no. It is not a partnership, it is an ego trip for an overgrown adolescent who wants to feel superior. The internet courtroom on this story was an absolute bloodbath. You always have that one loud contrarian faction that jumps in to play defense attorney for the creepy older guy. They came out swinging with the classic consent argument. They claimed that she is a legal adult, you are taking away her agency, and it is actually misogynistic to tell an adult woman who she can or cannot date. They argued that controlling who consenting adults date is downright bigoted, and that people should just live their own lives and stop obsessing over other relationships. But that toxic hot take was immediately obliterated by a tsunami of savage rebuttals from women who had actually lived through this exact nightmare. Women who had been the 19-year-old child girlfriend completely flooded the comments, telling this girl to run far and fast from Jeremy. They laid out the brutal truth. Experience is a cruel but highly effective teacher. They talked about being love bombed, manipulated, and isolated by older men who were just working their way down to the young ones because they had run through all the women their own age. One former victim noted that just because you are legally an adult does not mean you have the mental capacity or life experience to navigate that kind of extreme power dynamic. Another commenter delivered an absolutely chilling reality check on the sheer generational divide. They pointed out that if you want to know if someone is too young, ask if they can remember where they were on September 11th. Um, Taking it even further, someone realized that a 19-year-old right now was not even in high school when the global lockdowns happened. She probably got her first cell phone as an iPhone, and she essentially speaks an entirely different language than a man pushing 40. The absolute destruction of the defenders continued as professionals weighed in. People pointed out that newer research shows the human brain continues to structurally develop well into your 30s, creating new pathways for the rest of your life. So the idea that a teenager is on the same intellectual playing field as someone nearing middle age is a complete joke. One woman perfectly summarized the creepy dynamic, recalling how she dated a much older artist at 24, only to realize he treated her like a neuron-free sex symbol and threw massive tantrums when she got more attention than him online. She realized he was incredibly immature and that the relationship was just a superficial arrangement where he dangled opportunities over her head for attention. It is never about equality. The commenters rightfully called out the rest of the friend group, saying shame on them for putting up with this behavior and that they should be judging him rather than accepting it. The final verdict here is incredibly clear. The writer is absolutely not the a-hole for protecting his peace and his home from this walking red flag. If anything, the rest of the friend group is failing miserably by looking the other way and enabling a predator just to keep game night comfortable. Jeremy is not a victim of a smear campaign. He is suffering the natural social consequences of dating someone young enough to be his child. So, what is the exact text message the writer needs to send to put the final nail in the coffin of this friendship? Open your phone and type this out. Open quote. Hey, Jeremy. Let us get one thing perfectly straight. No one is running a smear campaign against you, and I am certainly not jealous that you're dragging a teenager to 21 and up restaurants. You are almost 40. The fact that you have to date a college freshman because women your own age see right through your drinking habits and immaturity is embarrassing. Have a great time in Europe, but lose my number permanently. Close quote. It is cold, it is factual, and it completely strips away his delusional ego. What would you do if your longtime friend started bringing a teenager around to your dinner parties? Would you stay quiet to keep the peace, or would you scorch the earth and cut them off completely? Um, Let me know down in the comments, and if you live for this kind of unfiltered internet drama, hit that subscribe button. I will catch you in the next one. What happens when you ask a teenager to get off a gym treadmill she is not even using? Her entitled mother steps in, demands you respect her right to sit there, and gets absolutely humiliated in front of the entire gym. Let us get right into the chaos. The gym is supposed to be a place of focus, a shared community space where everyone silently agrees to a basic social contract. You use the equipment, you wipe it down, and you move on. But our writer recently started a running journey, and his local gym does not exactly have a massive supply of treadmills. He heads to the gym late one night with his girlfriend, fully motivated and ready to get his miles in, only to find every single treadmill occupied. Being a reasonable guy, he pivots. He hits the weight machines first to kill some time, assuming the cardio area will clear out soon enough. After finishing his sets, he loops back around to the treadmills, and that is when he spots her. There is a girl just casually sitting on one of the treadmills, completely stationary, while her friend runs on the machine right next to her. Now, maybe she was just catching her breath, maybe she was tying her shoe, but the writer keeps an eye on the situation, and 15 whole minutes pass. 15 minutes of this girl treating an expensive piece of shared cardio equipment like a park bench. The writer finally reaches his breaking point. He walks right up to her and politely asks if she is actually planning to use the machine. The girl looks at him and casually explains that she is just there with her friend. The writer, keeping his cool but stating the obvious, suggests that she could just stand next to her friend's machine instead of taking up a treadmill from people who actually want to work out. Her response? She literally just shrugs her shoulders and flat out refuses to move. The sheer audacity is staggering. But before the writer can even process this level of teenage entitlement, the final boss enters the arena. An older woman marches over completely aggressively and demands to know what is happening. The writer calmly explains the situation, expecting the adult in the room to understand basic gym etiquette. Instead, the woman announces that she is the girl's mother, and she immediately scolds the writer, telling him that he has absolutely no right to tell her daughter to move. The writer does not back down. He stands his ground and reiterates that her daughter should not be hogging machines she has zero intention of using. The mother looks him dead in the eye and says her daughter is perfectly free to sit there if she wants to, and that she is doing absolutely nothing wrong. At this point, the writer realizes he is dealing with generational delusion, so he delivers a lethal verbal strike. He simply looks at the mother and says he can completely see exactly where her daughter gets her entitlement from. The mother absolutely loses her mind, shouting that he is way out of order for commenting on her parenting. But the writer is completely unfazed. He looks right back at her and says she should probably try being a better parent if she cannot handle a little bit of criticism. The commotion gets so loud that a staff member finally has to rush over, and after hearing the writer explain the situation, the employee looks right at the daughter and tells her to either get off the treadmill immediately or leave the entire gym. It is a massive victory for common sense. But later, the writer's girlfriend actually questions his actions, saying that maybe he should not have argued with the mother in the first place. Let us pump the brakes and put the writer under the microscope for a second, because the girlfriend's reaction is incredibly telling. Was the writer too eager for a fight? Did he escalate a completely minor annoyance into a full-blown public spectacle just to prove a point? You could argue that the second the mother swooped in and got defensive, the writer should have just smiled, walked away, and grabbed a manager. Engaging with an irate, irrational parent in a crowded gym is basically throwing gasoline on a fire. But we have to look at the psychological profile of this mother. This is not just a woman defending her child from a threat. This is textbook main character syndrome mixed with extreme helicopter parenting. She does not view the gym as a communal space with shared rules. She views her gym membership as a ticket to absolute freedom from societal expectations. When the writer pointed out her daughter's terrible etiquette, the mother did not hear a valid complaint about a treadmill. She heard a direct, devastating attack on her entire identity as a mother. If she admits her daughter is wrong, she has to admit that she failed to raise a considerate human being. So instead of parenting, she chooses blind, irrational defense. She would rather go to war with a stranger than teach her kid basic respect. This ridiculous standoff at the gym highlights a much darker shift in how we experience public spaces today. We are watching the complete death of the third place, those communal areas outside of work and home where people used to gather and interact. With malls struggling and closing down due to online shopping, teenagers have nowhere left to exist. Parks are not great in the winter, and parents are terrified to let their kids hang out unsupervised due to a highly exaggerated fear of crime. So, what happens? The teenagers flock to the gym, but they are not there to exercise. They are there to hang out, scroll on their phones, and treat the weight room like a high school cafeteria. One gym goer online shared a painfully relatable story about trying to use the indoor track only to get stuck behind three teenagers walking arm in arm, completely blocking the entire path. When asked politely to stop so others could pass, the teens literally rolled their eyes, said they did not have to move, and completely ignored the gym's posted rules. And this is exactly what happens when society completely stops enforcing the social contract. We have become so hyper individualized and so terrified of confrontation that people just accept this awful behavior. A complete lack of community accountability has emboldened an entire demographic of people who firmly believe the world is just a backdrop for their own personal movie. The internet absolutely erupted over this specific confrontation, and the comment section turned into a brutal ideological war zone. A very vocal, conflict avoidant faction immediately jumped on the writer, claiming that his biggest mistake was trying to handle the situation himself. One user firmly stated that the writer should have gone straight to a gym attendant the second the girl refused to move, arguing that outsourcing the conflict is the only way to minimize a nasty confrontation. Another commenter pointed out that you can never truly know what flavor of crazy you are dealing with until you have their complete undivided attention. They argued that confronting strangers today could lead to false accusations, physical violence, or dealing with people completely out of their minds on steroids. To this group, gym employees are literally paid to deal with these exact headaches. So trying to be the hero is just immature and completely unnecessary. They compared it to having a noisy neighbor. You do not go knock on their door and risk a fight. You just call the police or the landlord and let the authorities handle it. But that hot take was immediately obliterated by an absolute avalanche of reality checks. People were disgusted by the idea that grown adults should be completely incapable of having a basic conversation without running to find an authority figure. One brilliant commenter completely destroyed the neighbor analogy, pointing out how insanely disrespectful it is to call the cops on someone over a minor noise complaint without just knocking on their door and asking them to keep it down first. Another user accurately diagnosed the real issue, stating that this constant outsourcing of conflict is exactly how we have arrived at such a broken society. They argued that telling adults to go find an adultier adult to solve their minor problems completely destroys our ability to handle basic confrontation. It is a gym, not a maximum security prison. You should be perfectly capable of asking a teenager if they are using a machine. As one person savagely put it, treating the gym like a personal lounge is completely wild behavior, and the fact that the staff ultimately had to threaten to kick the girl out proves that the writer was entirely justified. Another gym veteran chimed in to say that if you give people grace and ask politely first, you are being a functioning member of society. But the second they double down and act entitled, they deserve whatever harsh reality check comes their way. The absolute consensus is that the writer is completely undeniably not the a-hole. He did exactly what a normal, civilized person should do. He observed a problem, he waited a very reasonable 15 minutes, and he used his words to ask a simple question. The idea that his girlfriend wanted him to just back down and let the mother win is incredibly frustrating. Keeping the peace when someone is being blatantly disrespectful does not actually create peace. It just rewards terrible behavior. Every single time you walk away from an entitled person without checking them, you are reinforcing their belief that the rules simply do not apply to them. That mother needed to hear exactly what the writer said. She needed to be deeply embarrassed in front of the entire gym because public shame is sometimes the only mirror that works for people who are entirely self-absorbed. So how should you handle this if you ever find yourself staring down a human roadblock at your local gym? First of all, never stop asking people politely. Do not let the fear of a crazy reaction turn you into a silent, resentful bystander. But the next time an entitled parent steps in and demands you respect their child's right to hog a machine, look them right in the eye and deliver this exact script. Quote, I am not having a debate with you about your child. This is a shared facility that we all pay to use. You can either teach your daughter basic respect for the people around her, or we can let the management cancel your membership for violating the gym's code of conduct. Your choice. It leaves absolutely no room for an argument. It strips away their emotional defensive barrier and gives them a completely binary choice: act like an adult or get treated like a liability. What would you do if you were waiting for a machine and a teenager was using it to scroll through their phone? Would you walk away and complain to the front desk, or would you march right up and ask them to move? Let me know exactly how you would handle it down in the comments. And if you want more insane stories about people getting the brutal reality checks they deserve, make sure you hit that subscribe button. I will catch you in the next one. Imagine a 32-year-old woman purposefully ghosting the guys she actually likes. And when you finally point out that her strategy is completely delusional, everyone at the dinner table looks at you like you are the villain. Well, grab a snack because one husband just shattered his wife's friend group's toxic echo chamber with a dose of brutal honesty, and the fallout is absolutely spectacular. Our writer is a 38-year-old guy whose wife is 34, and they are hosting a nice, normal dinner party with some of her girlfriends. Eventually, the conversation shifts to the classic topic of modern romance, and one of the friends, who is 32, starts complaining about her miserable love life. She cannot seem to find any good men who actually stick around. The wife and the other friends are playing the supportive roles, nodding along sympathetically as they dissect her latest dates. But then the friend reveals her secret dating technique. What is this masterful strategy? She intentionally shows as little interest as possible and straight up ghosts the guys she actually likes, all because she wants them to fight for her. Let that sink in. She is a full-grown adult in her 30s, playing the kind of manipulative games you expect from an insecure teenager. The writer, who happens to be on the autism spectrum, physically cannot contain himself. He just laughs out loud right at the dinner table and tells her that her technique is just plain stupid. He points out the incredibly obvious flaw in her master plan. Of course, she is not finding any good men because only the bad ones will actually keep chasing a woman who ignores them. He hits her with the cold, hard reality that a good guy who respects women and respects boundaries is never going to keep pursuing someone who sends out signals that she does not want him. It is basic logic. But the truth hurts, and the dinner table goes cold. The writer's wife actually physically bumps him and tells him to shut up. The rest of the night is incredibly awkward, and after everyone finally leaves, the wife turns to him. You would think she was going to yell at him for being wrong, but nope. She admits that she completely agreed with everything he said. Her only issue was that he did not need to be so incredibly blunt about it. Now, let us pause and really look at what is going on beneath the surface of this disaster. The writer acknowledges that his autism can make it hard for him to realize when people are getting upset, but he also firmly believes that while being on the spectrum explains why he might put his foot in his mouth, it absolutely does not excuse it. He is holding himself accountable, which is incredibly rare in these kinds of stories. But what about this friend? Why is she self-sabotaging so aggressively? Well, the writer dug a little deeper with his wife and uncovered the friend's incredibly messy history. Apparently, 3 years ago, she completely ruined her long-term relationship of 4 years. They had a terrible fight. She stormed out to get some drinks to cool off, and in a fit of pure spiteful anger, she slept with a random guy. The writer even asked if she was blackout drunk to try and make sense of this reckless choice. But no. Um, the wife confirmed her friend was completely sober. She was just in an awful mental place, and actively wanted to punish her boyfriend. She eventually felt guilty and confessed, and he obviously dumped her on the spot. Ever since that spectacular implosion, her dating life has been an absolute wasteland of one night stands and short flings with terrible guys. The absolute best relationship she managed to scrape together lasted a measly 4 months, and even that ended in disaster. Due to her utterly broken communication skills, he thought they were just friends with benefits, while she thought they were a committed couple. So when she found out he was sleeping with other people, she was heartbroken all over again. She has deep, unresolved trauma from destroying her own 4 year relationship, and she is projecting it onto every new guy she meets. She is using this ghosting technique as a massive, impenetrable defense mechanism. If she ghosts them first, she holds all the power. If they do not chase her, she can blame them for not caring enough, rather than facing the terrifying reality that she is utterly unequipped for a healthy communicative relationship. This whole situation brings up a massive, frustrating dynamic that happens in so many adult friend groups. Why are these grown women sitting around a dinner table, drinking wine, and nodding along to a friend who is actively ruining her own life? One of the commenters nailed it by calling it a form of toxic positivity that leads people into a lifetime of loneliness without them even knowing why. There is a culture, especially among certain friend groups, where unconditional support is completely confused with blind validation. As one commenter put it, many people do not want to hear actual solutions. They just want someone to agree with them. The internet had a massive debate over this exact communication style. One user brought up a brilliant concept they use in their marriage, asking a simple question when their partner starts venting: are we bitching or fixing? Do you want to just let out your emotions and have them validated, or are we looking for a tangible solution to this perceived problem? Another user shared a brilliant management tactic called being a rubber duck. Instead of offering aggressive solutions, you just ask gentle questions to guide the person to their own realization. It is a genius way to navigate these landmines. Some commenters tried to turn this into a tired gender war, claiming women only want empathy while men only want to fix things. But others beautifully shut that down by pointing out that people just love to pointlessly gender things, and both men and women experience the need to just be heard without being lectured. Everyone just wants their feelings validated first. But, and this is a massive but, there is a huge difference between holding space for someone to process their emotions and actively cheerleading them as they make terrible decisions that will leave them miserable. The friend group is actively failing this 32-year-old woman. By refusing to hold up a mirror to her ridiculous high school dating games, they are validating a strategy that actively repels emotionally healthy men. We live in a society where the concept of yes means yes is finally being fully accepted. So, this ancient, manipulative idea of playing hard to get desperately needs to die. The writer was fighting against decades of terrible pop culture conditioning. One user noted her strategy sounds like it was ripped straight from a terrible dating advice book from the 90s called The Rules, which explicitly tells women to not return calls, play games, and hide their true selves to secure a marriage. Others pointed out that there used to be defunct, incredibly toxic communities on the internet, like Female Dating Strategy, that praise this exact kind of manipulative nonsense. As multiple people pointed out, any man with an ounce of self respect is going to walk away after being rejected. If a woman acts like she is not interested, a good modern man is going to say, okay, cool, and move on to the next person because his dating circles are getting smaller and he does not have time for childish games. The only men who will ignore those clear boundaries and continue to hunt down a woman who is ghosting them are the exact toxic, predatory guys she is complaining about. She is literally setting up a trap that exclusively catches absolute garbage. Looking at the internet's reaction to this mess, the courtroom debate gets incredibly spicy. Some people definitely tried to come for the writer's blunt delivery. One user tried to take the absolute high road, arguing that calling someone's strategy plain stupid is never going to win friends. They claimed that beginning a sentence with a harsh judgment instantly puts people on the defensive and turns a casual conversation into a bitter argument. They even provided these gentle, overly therapized alternative scripts, suggesting the writer should have delicately asked her if she thought showing no interest could be misconstrued by guys as a lack of connection or chemistry. But honestly, that kind of delicate tiptoeing is exactly why this woman is still single and miserable at 32. The internet quickly fired back with an absolute avalanche of reality checks. One brutal commenter pointed out the terrifying truth. From a man's perspective, there is no difference between stalking a woman and following up on someone who is playing hard to get. Another user laid it out perfectly. If I have to chase you, you are getting away. They noted that feigning disinterest is fundamentally inauthentic, and players might stick around to play with you, but those are never the best dudes. It is completely insane to enforce an idiotic expectation for a potential partner to exhibit mind reading skills and magically sort out when no actually means no versus when no secretly means try harder. Another person completely destroyed the friend's victim mentality with a legendary quote: "If you run into an asshole in the morning, you ran into an asshole. But if you run into assholes all day, you are the asshole." This woman is running into bad men every single day because she is holding up a giant neon sign that says boundaries do not matter here. Um, the absolute best take was a commenter who pointed out that the writer actually saved her. He was the hero who took one for the team, delivering the harsh truth she desperately needed to hear, while her cowardly friends got to keep their hands clean and play the empathy card. She might be mad right now, but he planted a critical seed of logic in a brain that has been running on pure delusion. So, where do we land on this glorious disaster? The writer is absolutely, unequivocally not the a-hole. He was the only true friend in that entire room. Sure, his delivery was like a freight train crashing through a quiet living room, but some people are so wrapped up in their own defensive mechanisms that they need a freight train to wake them up. His wife and her friends are doing this woman a massive disservice by patting her on the back while she walks straight off an emotional cliff. So, how should the writer handle the awkward fallout with his wife and her fragile social circle? He needs to establish an ironclad boundary right now so he never has to endure this kind of exhausting, delusional conversation again. If his wife expects him to grovel and apologize just to keep the peace, he should send this exact message to the group chat. Quote, "Hey everyone, I understand my delivery at dinner was incredibly harsh, and I sincerely apologize for making the room uncomfortable. However, I stand entirely by my core point. I want the absolute best for you, but I cannot sit by and validate dating strategies that actively encourage men to ignore a woman's boundaries. I truly hope you find the right guy. But from now on, I will gladly step out of the room when dating advice comes up so I do not step on any toes." Unquote. It is polite, it is firm, and it subtly reminds them that their logic is incredibly dangerous and he refuses to play along with their toxic echo chamber. The ball is entirely in their court now. They can either wake up and smell the reality of modern dating, or they can keep complaining about bad men while literally begging to be chased by them. What would you do if a close friend confidently told you they use ghosting as a primary dating strategy to test people? Would you smile and nod just to keep the peace and enjoy your wine? Or would you drop the hammer of truth like our writer did? Let me know down in the comments. Hit that subscribe button if you want more unfiltered internet drama, and I will catch you in the next one.